the Kennedy Space Center Visitor Complex to celebrate a milestone anniversary for the Atlantis shuttle program. Let's go.
Glad to see a great crowd here today. It's standing room only. This is amazing. This is awesome. So I'm Howard Schwartz. I am the Vice President of Guest Engagement here at Kennedy Space Center Visitor Complex. And again, I want to welcome everybody to this very, very special day. I'm going to introduce you to Mike Leinbach. He is was the shuttle launch director for almost all shuttle missions, many shuttle missions, and was the shuttle launch director for the final Atlantis mission. He's going to be here today introducing our panel of astronauts, and will be moderating for the day. So please welcome Mike Leinbach.
Okay, howdy everybody. It's a beautiful place to have a gathering like this underneath Atlantis. Can you all hear me in the back? Thumbs up, okay. Well, let's see, Howard introduced, my name's Mike Leinbach. Call me Mike if you have a question or anything. If you call me Mr. Leinbach, I will not respond. My name is Mike, okay? I was launch director for the last 11 years of the Space Shuttle program and launched the vehicle 37 times. So with that, I would like to introduce my favorite crew, the last crew of the Space Shuttle, and flew on this vehicle above your heads, the good ship Atlantis. The commander, a veteran of 3 Space Shuttle flights, retired Navy captain, commander of 135, Mr. Chris Ferguson. Chris, come on up. Okay, the pilot of the mission, veteran of 2 Space Shuttle missions and commander of the first SpaceX Crew Dragon mission, Mr. Doug Hurley. Doug, come on up. Okay, and next, a veteran of 3 Space Shuttle missions, crew member on ISS, International Space Station Expedition number 18, Mission Specialist 1 for 135, Sandy Magnus. Sandy. And last but not least, a veteran of 3 Space Shuttle missions, and I believe they were all on Atlantis. Is that correct? Yep, all on Atlantis. Mission Specialist 2 and Flight Engineer for the final mission, Mr. Rex Walheim. Rex. Okay, introduction's done, page is turned. Here we go. We're going to do some questions that I worked very, very long and hard on last night. And you can judge whether they're good questions or not. And the answers, you can judge them as well. At the end of the presentation, there'll be time for questions from you guys. So as we're going through today, just think of anything you want to ask these 4 space flyers. Now's your chance, okay? And I've got all these questions, but we're standing under Atlantis. Holds a lot of memories for me, and I know it holds a lot of memories for you guys. Just Chris, Doug, Sandy, and Rich, just tell the audience what it feels like to look up at Atlantis, a vehicle you've flown in, commanded or piloted or mission specialist. Just tell us your feelings about being here and looking and seeing Atlantis up there.
My first memory of seeing an orbiter from underneath is when we walked into one of the orbiter processing buildings. And you walk into this and the orbiter was completely enveloped by scaffolding, and you couldn't even make out sort of where it began and where it ended, and you couldn't even actually see it. And then you ended up walking under it, because you sort of expected to see it in front of you. You walked under it and looked up, and it was just this jet black bottom that we see right here. And it was just such an incredible thing to see the very first time.
We talked about this the other day, just being the last flight, being the last orbiter that got to fly, and just how well it performed. It was just I mean, we had literally almost a flawless mission, and that's just a testament to the folks that processed and worked on this vehicle and kept it in such good shape, and it took great care of us, and we got to accomplish our mission.
Cool, very good.
So I think we all have to agree that the display of the Atlantis here is quite dramatic, right? When you walk through the screen and it opens up, isn't that amazing? And I remember when I first went through that process and opened it up, and it was a little bit of a sense of displacement because we had just been on the vehicle, it seemed like yesterday, and here it was hanging majestically in this marvelous building. And I really think this display does credit to what the shuttle feels like on orbit and how we see it a lot while we're working. And it's just really special to see it every time I come.
Very good.
Yeah, I think what comes to mind when you mention that is gratitude. Gratitude. This vehicle took us to space and back, for me, 3 times. And gratitude for all the people who worked on it, who made it possible and made it safe to do. And just gratitude to having a chance to be part of this incredible program.
Very good, I appreciate that. Y'all aren't here to hear from me, but I got to tell you one Atlantis story. When Atlantis first arrived, much like Chris, and it was in the vehicle assembly building being mated to the external tank, and the bottom of the belly of the vehicle, the black tiles were so black, and the white sides were so white, and the American flag was just perfect. It was just a beautiful thing to see, and it still is. Let's see, 2 of my questions that I worked so hard on. And anyone can take this, okay? What's the one behind-the-scenes moment during your mission, your final mission, that people would never see on TV that really captures what life on the shuttle was actually like?
I think probably everybody here, have you ever woken up somewhere and you're like, where am I, what's going on? So flight day 6 or 7, Sandy was sleeping on ISS, but Rex and Fergie and I were sleeping on the middeck of Atlantis. And the master alarm goes off at about 3 in the morning. And we all sleep in sleeping bags that are tethered to different parts of the middeck. And I just remember waking up, what's that noise? I remember looking across the middeck, and Fergie had that same look that I had, which was, where am I, what's going on? And anyway, finally work our way out of the fog, and then get quickly up to the middeck, or the flight deck, to figure out what's going on. It ended up being one of our 5 general purpose computers was not having a good evening. And anyway, we had to work through, what's it called? FRP. It was a procedure to basically restart the computer for the next 2 hours. So just a total normal story about waking up, not knowing where you are. Oh, I'm on the space shuttle. Oh, we have a malfunction. We better get up to the flight deck. So that was not something that was, I think, even hardly talked about, although I think we got another hour of sleep. Somehow they gave us an hour of sleep that next day, and then we went back to work. But anyway.
Yeah, well, those master alarms should get your attention, couldn't they? Yeah. Anybody else want to take a crack at what is life on the shuttle really like?
One thing we were talking about this amongst the crew last night when we had dinner is that Atlantis has this little quirk that happened every time of the 3 times I flew it, and I never mentioned it to the other crew members that to expect this. And unfortunately, it has a bad habit when you're coming down on the heading alignment cylinder, when you start getting some vibrations from air molecules and stuff, and the pilot and commander are trying really hard to fly this vehicle, the bathroom door comes swinging open and slamming against the ladder, and there's this huge bang that goes downstairs. And the first time, on 110, I looked at it and they said, oh yeah, I could see it, and we told the crew what it was. Second time, on 122 upstairs, sure enough, same thing, whack, bang, and of course on 135, these guys are trying to fly the thing, and then all of a sudden, at the same time, bang, the bathroom door comes slamming into the ladder, so it got our attention.
We were like less than a minute away from landing, too.
Yeah.
That was way too much. There were too many heartbeats in there.
Sandy, anything?
No, I think the one thing that defined 135, and by the way, we were so incredibly busy, it was unbelievable, but was all of the storage and the logistics that we were doing. So we moved about 8,000 pounds of stuff from the shuttle to the station, and then about 6,000 pounds of stuff back from the station to the shuttle. And they had cameras that were watching us going in and out of the MPLM with these big white bags, and we were moving around, but what you didn't see off camera was just the mess we were making at the space station, because we had to put these bags somewhere and there wasn't enough room, and it was just, off camera, it looked like somebody blew up a closet. It was just such a mess we left the space station guys, and they forgave us, thank goodness. But.
Okay. You mentioned that you were very, very busy on the flight. How much time did you guys have just to relax and look out the window and enjoy what you were doing?
My memory was there's two, I think. One, you always take some time on the space station while you're there to look at that giant window to the world, the cupola, which just is an amazing thing. Some people like to even sleep in there because it's just so compelling. But I think that other than that, other than taking a few minutes looking out that window, I remember it wasn't until the night before we landed that we actually had a little bit of time to exhale and look out the window and sort of appreciate the Earth a little bit. And along the way, we tried to thank the various flight control teams that had worked with us throughout, our 1 year of training. Of course, it was their last mission too. So we tried to sort of call them out by name a little bit. And that was fun, going through that, I think, on the last day. So.
I will comment, one of the reasons I sleep on the space station is that I can stay awake later and not disturb people. So after everybody was asleep, both the station crew and these guys in the mid deck, for 3 nights in a row, I went to the cupola and I stayed there for a couple hours just enjoying the view of the Earth all by myself in just the peaceful quiet of the station with everybody sleeping. So I didn't sleep quite as much as you guys did because I was sneaking my last views of the planet. It was beautiful.
Yeah, I've always heard that if we scrub the landing and we have to go around for another day, that you guys aren't too disappointed. I guess that's true. Yeah.
It's a free day in space.
That's right.
It's like a day off in space. It's wonderful.
That's good stuff. Well, let's move on to, as we prepare to land and live on the moon, what lessons learned from the shuttle program do you really expect to carry forward and the teams respect and deal with? Lessons learned from shuttle as we go forward.
I'll start. I think one of the things that we have to think about as we go to the moon is the relationship between what the crew does and what the ground does. And we need vehicles that are a little more autonomous. And Mike, I don't know if you'll agree with me or not, but right now, on the space station and on the shuttle, the ground is watching over the health of the vehicle. They're watching, the battery state of charge, what is the thermal condition, what's the motion control system doing, et cetera, et cetera. As we get further and further away and go to the moon and even Mars someday, we need vehicles that are going to be able to maintain themselves, and the ground's going to have to take a little bit more of a strategic role than a tactical everyday role. And we learned a lot just going from the shuttle to the space station too, as well as how the crew manages their day and how the ground schedules their day and the level of autonomy and the division of roles and responsibilities. And these are not necessarily technical issues, but operational issues that we have to address as we get people more and more remote from the planet, and how you define those different roles and responsibilities and operational paradigms.
Yeah, that's a good, go ahead, Rick.
Yeah, I was going to say, I agree with what Sandy's saying. The autonomy, we need to have autonomous systems, and the next systems that go to the moon are going to be much more autonomous than the shuttle was. But there's something to be said for a highly trained pilot and test pilot in the cockpit to be able to land manually if you need to. Things go wrong, especially when we're landing on the moon for the first time in 50 years. So it's really nice to have humans on board who are trained to do that and can in a pinch.
How do you get those lessons learned forward to the next crews that are going to go to the moon? Do you all have hot washes after missions? And I mean, how are those lessons going to be implemented?
Okay, I'll go again. I think it's really important, and I'm not sure that we've done this so well in the aerospace industry as well as they've done it in the tech industry, where designing an iPhone or designing different apps and things that they do in the tech industry, they go straight to the user, find out what the user needs, and they really incorporate the user's experience and the user's desires and what they think the user needs into the design at the very beginning. I don't think we've really captured that sense of design in aerospace yet. As operators, we do debrief after every mission and provide feedback on what works and what doesn't work. but sometimes that information doesn't get all the way down to the engineering design phases as much as it should. I think that's an area we need to improve on.
Okay, that's a good one. And Doug, for you, having flown on the SpaceX vehicle, how do you get the NASA lessons learned to SpaceX, and how does SpaceX get their lessons learned back to NASA?
Yeah, it's a great question. Essentially it came down to working day to day. We essentially moved to California, a small NASA team, not just the 2 astronauts, but we had engineers, operators, that kind of, and just worked through each phase of the design, at least when it comes to the human vehicle interface, and tried to figure out what was going to work, and I'll give you a perfect example. The idea was Elon didn't want to have hand controllers in Dragon. So, because of the aesthetic of the interior of Dragon, so they had an idea that we would fly Dragon manually with a touchscreen. Wow. And so, imagine, the fighter pilot, test pilot, sitting there with my crewmate Bob Benkin, and I know he sensed that I was like, you have to be kidding. We're not going to fly a spaceship with a touchscreen. And he just kind of squeezed my arm, so I didn't say anything. And anyway, we went through the process. That's what they decided we were going to do and how we were going to manually fly the vehicle. And it was a long process because Dragon, frankly, didn't fly very well manually. And we worked the problem, continued. In fact, for example, we had 6 astronauts out there. Nobody could dock it except for 1. And but we worked through the problem and constructively went through several iterations of software and control mechanisms, and then ultimately, when we flew the vehicle in space for real, we did a manual handling qualities demo. It flew just like the simulator. Wow. Much better. But it's that small team combination of the NASA folks that have decades of experience with a very agile company that's willing to put in the time and money to build the control systems that we need to have, and it actually, frankly, worked fine. Not sure long term I would want to fly a vehicle with a touchscreen. Certainly, an ascent type of task or an entry task would be much more difficult with a touchscreen, but on orbit, it was doable.
Okay.
One of the other ways we transfer lessons to the next designs and next generation is that a lot of us, after we leave the shuttle program, we go off to just commercial companies, and Fergie worked for Boeing, and Doug works for Northrop, and I work for Blue Origin, and so not only do we pass our lessons on, but we also have a network to feed back to the folks who are still left there and say, hey, what do you guys think about this? And so we really try to pay the forward, go back to our lessons, but also go back to our networks that say, hey, what do you guys think about this and that?
And go ahead, Chris.
Well, it's interesting because we sort of have been doing this, and when I joined Boeing, we had Tom Stafford, who was an Apollo era astronaut who was consulting with them, and that is the way. So it's not just new, right? This goes all the way back to some of the old Apollo dinosaurs, if you will, that have been passing these lessons down to us in the building of the new commercial vehicles, and now we get the opportunity to sort of pass that down to the next generation. So.
Okay. Very good. Yeah, you mentioned Boeing. You were with them for quite a number of years, and so they were open to the idea of lessons learned from the shuttle program.
They're very, it was we had pretty much carte blanche to build the vehicle sort of interface, the crew interface, the way that we wanted to, and there was never any questions or any pushback, and it came out largely the way we expected it to.
Good, very good. Let's see. Let's move on to a little risk-based question here. See, all astronauts accept a fair amount of risk to fly, and therefore must trust the ground folks, both here in Florida and at JSC, to prepare and execute the mission. So you have to have a lot of trust in the ground folks. How's that trust built up?
So I'll start. And one of the best visits that we had as a crew coming out to the Kennedy Space Center, which was a couple months before launch, is we came out for an exercise called CEIT, Crew Element Integration Test, and that was where, launch wasn't imminent, and you really had a chance to interface on a sort of personal level with everyone who was getting your vehicle prepared to launch. And after several visits and a few different missions, you really got to know people on almost a friendly basis. And there was a little bit of an interesting twist, of course, with the very last flight, because we knew, you know, and my recollection is there were 6,000 people working the shuttle program right for the year of 2011 when the last 3 shuttles launched. By August of that year, there were like 60. And everybody that we knew we interfaced with for not just STS-135, but all the previous missions knew that when we landed, their jobs were over. I mean, it wasn't they were going to move on to something else. It's their job went away. So I think we made a very special effort to get out to the Cape as often as we could. And, you know, to a person, I still remember, I mean, this vehicle was as good as the first and probably better than the first. And I mean, it was clean. It had very little issues with the exception of one computer problem that was a little pesky. But this orbiter, the last orbiter that launched, was as good as any orbiter that had launched before it. So in other words, the team was engaged up until the very end.
Yeah, very good. And that crew interaction, the astronaut interaction with the folks here in Florida, and of course with their trainers back in Houston, that was a finding out of the Challenger accident, that the crews were not quite as engaged as they should be. And so one of the findings was to get the astronauts to walk around and get to know people, because they're real people. You know, I can't express enough as a launch director what that meant to me, that we were launching my friends. And that became very, very important to get to know them so that I could give that final go. And again, I don't want to make this about me, but it's about the relationship between the astronauts and the ground folks that's paramount. It really is.
Yeah, the other thing I was going to say is when we did spacewalks, we trained with our ground crew that developed the procedures and trained us, and then executed it as flight controllers. And on my second flight in Atlantis, STS-122, between the first spacewalk and the second spacewalk, they had to redo some of the procedures. And I heard later that the lead spacewalk trainer, Anna Jarvis, she did they stayed up all night probably and did all the procedures, and she got them done, and she handed them to the flight director in the flight control room and said, "These are the new procedures, and they're just like Rex wants them." Because she knew so well how well I did things that she knew what I wanted to do. So that's how well we knew our trainers and controllers.
That's good. Anybody else?
Yeah, I mean, it's somewhat cliched, but it's so true. It's the biggest team sport, human spaceflight. And everybody from the person that lays the tile to resupplies the APUs, that processes the vehicle within the OPF. I mean, everybody has to have a good day at their job, do it right, and and that testament was there. You know, we got back safely with a very clean vehicle.
Right.
And it works because everyone's really professional, but more importantly because everybody in the space industry is super passionate about the job, about the mission, about what we're trying to accomplish, and that makes it a really, really special workforce, quite frankly.
Very good. Well, let's see, we heard about the funky computer, but you were all veterans before 135, spaceflight veterans before 135. What was the most interesting thing that happened to you in that last mission that surprised you, other than the computer? Was there anything else?
I don't know about interesting. I just go back to the sheer amount of stuff that we were transferring back and forth across the hatch. You know, the cargo went up in the multi-purpose logistics module, and there's racks. There's, 5 or 6 bays in the MPLM, and then there's racks. And on the front and the back of the racks are all these white bags of various sizes that we were moving. And we were moving stuff in and out simultaneously. So it's like a big 3-dimensional jigsaw puzzle, and trying to understand with the minimum amount of effort and in the most efficient way how you remove bags from the MPLM and move them into the station, and then move bags from the station and back into the MPLM, knowing that there's a staging area on the station. The stuff on the station has to go in certain places, and some of that is stacked, so some of it has to go in first, because things stack on top of it. And so just managing all of that was interesting and challenging, and we spent a lot of time on the ground just walking through the plan of move this bag, then move this bag, and then move this bag back, and then on orbit, because we were so busy and things were so chaotic, any crew member at any time could go in and pick a bag up and move it, so we had to have a really good plan, and generally it worked. but it wasn't perfect. I think we brought home a few things we weren't supposed to bring home, but it was a.
Sure, that was an accident?
Yeah.
I don't know. It was a fun challenge, but it's a lot goes behind the scenes, and kudos to the logistics team that helped make that plan.
I remember, in fact, I think it was Sandy and I, because all of us, our previous flights, the cupola was not on ISS, and it was one of those towards the end of our docked mission, and we were in the cupola together, and the aurora that summer in 2011 was spectacular. I mean, it was constant, kind of like it is now this year. It seems like the folks from ISS are sending some incredible videos, but remember we were, and I'd never seen anything like it in my previous flight, and you could just see the ribbons of the aurora coming up almost as high as we were, and flying through this field of greens and purples. It was, I was like, well, this is CGI, this is fake, this is like, everybody wants to say the Earth is still round, by the way, just in case anybody has any doubt. It was spectacular, and I mean, it was to the point where I was like, I didn't even want to pick up a camera because I didn't want to stop the moment, and try to take a picture. It was just, felt like we were in a movie, but it was real life. It was incredible.
And Doug took some of the best pictures on our mission too. There's some award winners on there. Getting back to your earlier point about what's a day in space like, I wouldn't call this a pivotal moment on our mission, but space station has been lived in for 24 years now. I mean, it's got the era of, and the aura, and the odor of humans. I mean, and I remember every time you open the hatch on a shuttle mission, I was like, oh yeah, we're here.
You could tell when the shuttle came to pick me up for my expedition mission, I was about halfway back from the dock compartment. I couldn't see it. All of a sudden, they must have opened the hatch to the shuttle.
Because the air was fresh.
You could tell it, yeah.
So there's more to the story. About halfway through our dock mission, I'm really smelling something that's sort of a little foul. And Mike Fossum was the commander of the station, and I said, hey, Mike, your space station smells like a toilet. And he looked at me, he's like, it does?
Yeah, really?
And we all, I think, we smelled it right away. And the toilet broke. So they had to, and I still remember one of the quotes, because it ended up in our crew movie, was, space is amazing. One day you're out walking in space and fixing things, and the next day you're inside, trying to plunge your toilet. That's the way life was.
Now, you mentioned surprises. The only alarm I had on all 3 flights on Atlantis was on this last one. And shortly after liftoff, we had a master alarm, and it's DPDT, which is delta pressure over delta time, which means you're possibly leaking air. And so we got the alarm, and Sandy and I are back, and we both look up at the gauge, and we read it, and it was so big, it looked like we were going to have to do a return to launch site abort, which means come back here to KSC. Never been tried before. And so our guests would see a launch and a landing on one day, but we didn't want to do that necessarily. And so we looked at it, and then fortunately the ground and Chris said it's cabin stretch, which means we could disregard it. It was the cabin was stretching a little bit to make it look like a leak, but there was no leak. So for a few heartbeats there, Sandy and I were looking at this thing going, oh no.
Neither one of us wanted to say anything about it.
You didn't want to do an RTLS. Right. All right, that's good. I'm just curious, did you guys, when you got assigned to 135, did you know it was the last mission? All of you?
We knew that if it flew, it was going to be the last mission, but it wasn't guaranteed, I think, until maybe 6 months before launch. There was a bill that came on a part of a Space Act that funded the mission. So for the last year and a half of the Space Shuttle program, they called them pink missions. It was STS-133, 134, 135. And one by one, they got funded, and ours didn't get funded until we were well into training. I mean, we didn't know we were going until, literally months beforehand.
Wow. I think, if I remember correctly, I think there was like a subtle announcement Gerst put out. Gerstenmaier, for those of you who don't know who we're talking about, but he basically ran human spaceflight at the time, like the Friday before Christmas that year, so in 2010. And then we were talking about this the other day. John Shannon, who was the program manager of the shuttle program, told us, or I remember talking to him after we got back, and it was basically like, we were going to run out of money in the shuttle program in August. So if you guys hadn't flown by August, you weren't going to fly. So we were obviously very happy to hear that after the fact, because we flew in July. But
So you reach for your wallet.
yeah, exactly.
Hey, hang on, I
John,
think
how
I can-
much do you need?
We can help here.
You have a GoFundMe going.
But I felt there was a good shot at, though. You know, it's kind of like Americans on the 4th of July. They don't leave one firework left in the box. They fire them all off. And so I figured, you know, they're not going to let this, you know, fully assembled space shuttle just sit there and then let's take it apart. No, let's launch it.
And we really needed to get the logistics up there, because with the retirement of the space shuttle and the next cargo vehicles that were going to come up were going to be the very first commercial service cargo vehicles, and there was a little bit of uncertainty of when the commercial cargo vehicles were going to be ready. And our mission was really all about putting the logistics up there, the clothing, the science experiments, the consumables, any spare parts that needed to tide the station over for the next year or so as a gap until the cargo vehicles were there. So there was a real operational need to run the mission, despite all of the politics and the finances.
Speaking of logistics, this just popped back in my head. So this is about month 1 of Expedition 63. So I'm up there on the SpaceX Dragon test flight. The treadmill breaks. And of course, I think it was it was a full station moment. I think it was on a Saturday, treadmill breaks. Bob and I go into the MPLM to get the parts that the ground wants us to get. And it was some avionics box that needed to go onto the treadmill. I pull it out. It says STS-135 on the logistics tag. So we had brought that up 9 years earlier, that spare part for the treadmill, and there I am on a Saturday in 2020 fixing the treadmill with a part I brought up 9 years prior.
That's a victory for the
So
inventory
it was
system.
awesome. So it was kind of a full circle moment. And yeah, the treadmill was working the next day. So we're pretty happy we didn't mess that up either.
That's good stuff. Doug, I got a question for you. You know, you've flown the shuttle and the Crew Dragon, and they're vastly different ships, as everybody knows. Can you just describe the two ships? And if I don't even know what I'm asking. I'm asking, you know, if you had your choice of flying a shuttle again or the Crew Dragon, equal missions and all that, which would you choose?
I choose the shuttle because I could actually fly it most of the time. Okay. Sorry, pilots, test pilots, we just like to be in control. But as you alluded to, drastically different vehicles. I mean, if you're talking mass, this is about 220 or 30,000 pound vehicle right here. Dragon was about 23 or 4,000 pounds. So just, you know, this is a giant vehicle, and you got a little bit of maybe a VW Beetle for the Crew Dragon. Mm-hmm. This thing, especially when the boosters lit, you were going someplace, and hopefully it was in orbit, and it was just an incredible, massive vehicle. Dragon, we were kind of talking about this the other night. Dragon, you could feel everything. The wind noise as we got to max Q, you were literally right there. I didn't even have to look at the gauge to know that we were hitting max Q because of wind noise and the vibrations, and then all of a sudden they were gone. Shuttle was just this massive, you know, it shuddered when the RCS jets fired, but it landed very smoothly. We didn't pull many Gs. You know, we were 3 Gs at throttling, and coming back, we maybe got a G1/2. Dragon, we were 5-ish going up, and just about the same coming back on reentry. And then, of course, the big thing, and of course our Soyuz, the folks that flew on Soyuz mention this all the time, the parachute deployment sequence is the best, most crazy ride for about that 1 minute until things dampen out that you've ever experienced. So yeah, drastically different, but both incredible vehicles. But yeah, I'd want to take Atlantis for one more spin. I think maybe Chris and I could take it out for a quick mission.
Hey, don't forget us.
I think. Oh yeah, you guys. Yeah. Sorry.
We're just the cargo.
That's right. Yeah. We're just going up to fly it.
Fill it up and fly. What went through your all's mind when you touched down the runway the final time? Anybody?
You know, I mean, one thing that we wanted to make sure we did was end the space shuttle program without a lot of drama. And of course, you know, it's not over until your wheel's on the ground. So I personally, you know, I was happy we had a reasonable landing. You know, the speeches all went well. Nobody was sick. We got out, we walked around, we took a bunch of pictures, and then I think, you know, for me personally, late, you know, when you had a little time alone at the end of the day, you're like, wow, I am really glad we had the chance to do that, and I am really glad that everything turned out okay, because we wanted the nation to remember the shuttle program on the highest note possible.
I can't think of a better crew to do that than you four. It's just a fabulous mission. Thanks for being here. Okay, I got a couple more though. Hang on a second. Let's see. You mentioned the computer failure. Did y'all take duct tape with you on the vehicle?
That is the #1 tool in space.
And did you use it?
Super useful.
We did use it.
Yeah, we use it at home all the time.
Yeah. I think didn't we have something that we had to duct tape down in the middeck at some point?
We had
faintly
the
remembering.
door to the...
That's right, it was the
The
door.
LIO door or something
door.
we had to, wouldn't fasten, so we had to duct tape it to...
Remember we gave Jeff a homework problem. Jeff was our maintenance trainer on the ground, and he came back up with a procedure that was magnificent, but it did incorporate duct tape. So